It's also nakamouse. Just anything that you are not sure of. Just ayan na pala.
Sige po. Dali.
Later we will in our speaker like
Cerveza. Oh, picture. Kaon na rin. Okay. Ultra best, amigo. Ultra best. Okay. Guys, thumbs up for FPR. Grazie. Wait, for now, what do you wait? I miss his fan. Really, I salute him. Good president. FDR. Okay, let's begin the game. Let's start.
Carlo.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. First of all, I would like to call on President Michael Escalera to call the meeting to order. Fantastic. And next one, I'd like to call on Inigo Garcia to be our invocator.
Rise, please.
So let's all rise. In your Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We are thankful for everyone attending with our Rotary Club of Makati President Michael Escaler, with our esteemed board and members of our club who are physically here or joining us via online for our meeting today. For us, it's a blessing to listen to our speaker for today, Mr. Frank Thiel, as opportunity to learn from his sharing of his knowledge and expertise and understand the challenge on the issues that we may discuss on the topic Philippine power market challenges. May we appreciate and use each day that comes to us. We continue to pray for strength and guidance for each day as it comes, for each day's duty, for each day's problem, to help our families and our countrymen. May we be challenged to give our best always, as you have given the ability of each and every Rotarian and all attendees who are joining us in this RC Makati meeting. Please make us our instrument of change with your perpetual mercy and grace, O Lord. Amen.
Thank you. I'd like everybody to stay rise for the Philippine National Anthem. Thank you. We'll start with the RC Makati hymn.
We're the Rotary Club of Makati, and together we stand proud. We are leaders with integrity, always ready to serve humanity, always living by the four-way test, building goodwill and peace along the way, giving hope to the world. We're the there to aid our fellow men. As true Rotarians we live to lead. We believe in service above self, and this is why we succeed. We're the Rotary Club of Makati, and together we stand proud. We are leaders with integrity, always ready to serve humanity, always living by the four-way test, building goodwill and peace along the way, giving hope to the world. We're the Rotary Club of Makati, giving hope to the world. The Rotary Club of Makati.
Okay, so we will start with the four-way test of the things we think, say, or do. First, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you. Next up, I would like to have our greetings to our birthday and wedding anniversary celebrants. Rotarian, so Peter Coyuto on August 9th, Sonny Ko on August 12th, Ronnie Velayo, August 13th, Henry Akende on August 14th, Taba Samson on August 19th. And as for Anns, I'd like to acknowledge the birthdays of Menchu Pascual on August 10, Tisa Fernandez, August 11th, Maida Prieto, August 14th, Elena Coyuto on August 20th, Kathy Yu, August 21st, Angela Garcia, August 22nd. A lot of birthdays this month. As for anniversaries, I would like to congratulate Philip and Kathy Saya on August 10th, Adora and Celia Hizon on August 16th, Rodrigo and Marie Segura on August 17th, and as well as Director Andrew and Maida Prieto on August 20th. So give them all a round of congratulations, please. Next up, PDG Tony Kila will be recognizing our Paul Harris Fellow today.
Thank you, David. May I call on our baby Rotarian, Glenn Albano, for his first Polaris Fellow, and President Michael. Glenn.
Sir, picture. Okay. 1, 2, 3. No more. Thank you. Sure. You want
Yes. So we'll be introducing some guests right now, and Tito will like to introduce his guest first.
We're very proud to have 5 potential members. We're initiating them in a meeting like this, in a regular meeting, face to face. So I'd like to start out by introducing VP Lim, a prominent stockbroker specializing in backdoor listings. So if you want backdoor listing, that's the guy to talk to, VP Lim. He happens to be my nephew. Then we have Paulo Turno, who's actually being sponsored by PP Rene Benitez. He's the EVP of Rene in his company. Paulo Turno. Then on the table, we have, you can now face the person who donated those adult diapers last December, Nico Deirit. He was responsible for bringing in the Korean donations, remember? During the, so Sani Tambunting will like you because he's requesting for more adult diapers. That's Nico Deirit. Again, my nephew. Our nephew with Junjun Deirit. Where's Junjun? There. And then, attorney Stefano Lim, younger brother of BP. So we're adding a lawyer in our roster. Okay. But more than that, please meet those who live in Dasmariñas Village. He's one of your kagawads in Dasmariñas, Barangay Dasmariñas, Stefano. And then on the left side, I have, I'd like to introduce Nico Sunga. He's the president of his finance company. And he happens to be my son-in-law. So at the end of the day, this is nepotism at its best. Thank you, and we welcome them.
And then also in our table, a future member of ours, Nathan Galvez, son of Eddie Galvez.
I'd also like to introduce a few more. We've got Sui Suarez, my personal guest from Aboitiz Power. Next up, we have Dan La Chica, which is joining us from Zoom. Hi, Dan. Carlo Cachola on Zoom as well. Lea Lumasak on Zoom as well. Terence La Cuesta on Zoom as well. And I believe Nathan Galvez, if Tito didn't introduce you, you're over there. And then I would like to acknowledge our dignitaries here. PDG Tony Kila, PDG Sid Garcia, PDG Peps Bengzon, and our Ans Kalingyang. Welcome. Thank you, everybody. And after the introductions, not on the program, but I'd like to call up Keith Harrison for a quick turnover and announcement.
So as you may be aware from the chat group, there was a celebration dinner last night with where we, as a club led by President Michael, entertained RC Singapore, and President James Lee was not available. He'd already gone back to Singapore, but Shaul, Dr. Shaul, PP Shaul, was given the task of handing over a gift to the club, which is a donation, I believe. It's a message from President, I believe it's 1,000 on PHF, $1,000 from Singapore, and he managed to forget it. So he called me up this morning on my way, and I'm now delivering it. So if I may just pass it across.
Thank you, Keith. So next up, we are going to use this time for the President's time. I'd like to call on President Michael Escalera.
Good afternoon, everybody. There's still a debate in the board whether we're going to call this the Tito Panlilio Rotary Club, but anyway, we're really so happy to see our young people, our future of the Makati Rotary here. You inspire us that this mission of Rotary and the fellowship will be continuing for a long, long time. So welcome to the young. I would like to report that to thank IPP Louis Aseoche, Junjun Deirit, and Director Keith Harrison. Director Boom Villatuya and Eddie Galvez for taking time out to get on the road for a good 8 hours last Wednesday to Infanta, Quezon for the block laying for our third Rotary dorm. I hope to be able to be there for the inauguration and turnover sometime next month. Then for the next report, we hosted the RC Singapore again with the help of Keith and Reggie Nolido, PP Reggie Nolido, for arranging for 4 visiting members of our sister club, RC Singapore, last night at the People's Palace in Greenbelt 3. Thanks as well to our members who joined us there last night. Our Singaporean friends are very, very happy to be able to meet us face to face. I would like to thank again President nominee Director Keith and Rachel Harrison and PP David and DGN Mache Ackerman for agreeing to represent our club in the installation of RC Kuala Lumpur Diraja over the weekend. In case some of our members are going to this Thursday, August 11, you may want to drop by Narvacan and represent our club in their induction. Service Project Week, please be advised that next week is Service Project Week and we will have no meeting on Tuesday the 16th. We will use this time for the committees to meet and discuss their respective activity plans for the future. So thank you everybody and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you very much. And right now I'd like to call up Director Philip Sullivan to introduce our guest speaker today.
Thank you, David. Before I introduce our guest speaker formally, I just wanted to say, our guest speaker actually and Rodrigo are countrymates. They were both born in Colombia. So anyway, and apparently they're old friends. So today we're going to talk about a very important topic, right, which is power. What's our power situation and where do we go from here? Right? I think we are fortunate in our club to basically have a guest speaker such as Frank, but also to have our moderator as David Aboitis. So 2 of the captains of the power industry are with us today, and I'm hoping that the discussion that we will be having after the presentation is one that is actually very insightful and quite lively and useful for all of us. So with that, please allow me to introduce our guest speaker for this afternoon. Frank Thiel is currently the Managing Director of Quezon Power Limited, QPL, which is a power generating company with capacity of 460 megawatts. And they're based out of Mauban, Quezon. QPL is actually a wholly owned subsidiary of the Electricity Generating Public Company Limited, which is better known as EGCO of Thailand. Frank is also the general manager of another power company, which is called San Buenaventura Power Company Limited. This is a new 500 megawatt coal-fired power plant also located in Mauban, Quezon. San Buenaventura is a partnership between Meralco Power Gen Corporation, MGen, and the New Growth and EGCO of Thailand. So prior to these the concurrent roles, Frank managed the Intergen assets in Mexico. He also worked as Intergen's Vice President for Operations and Maintenance of the Asia Pacific region, the United Kingdom, Netherlands, Turkey, and Egypt. So before joining Intergen, Frank held positions with Westinghouse Electric Power Corporation, Bechtel Power, and Marine Pacific of California. So Frank holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Engineering from California Coast University, a Bachelor of Arts degree in Human Resources from the University of San Francisco, and he is a member of the American Society of Mechanical Engineers and the American Nuclear Society. Frank is also currently the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, and I sit on his board in that capacity. He's a board director of the Philippine Independent Power Producers Association and a member of the Makati Business Development Council. So I'm very happy to introduce to the club Mr. Frank Thiel.
Thanks very much for that kind introduction, Philip. First of all, I'd like to say I'm delighted to be here. Thanks to the Makati Rotary Club for inviting me to speak this morning. I'm going to try and make this as interesting as I can make it, although power is a very challenging subject in general, but we'll try to make it as interactive as possible. David, thanks for the kind invitation. Philip is also, like as he mentioned, we serve in the American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines Board, so we've known each other for quite some time. Great to see a lot of friendly faces here this morning. I wasn't expecting to see my countryman this morning. It took me a while to recognize him since he was wearing a mask and he has a new hairstyle. So it took me a few minutes to recognize him. But I got to tell you something. As part of the American Chamber of Commerce, I think I'm going to requisition something like that to start the meetings. I love the sound of that gong, to call the meeting to order. We don't have that in the American Chamber just yet. But I think I'm going to request one of those things. Before I actually launch into the presentation, the slides proper, I just want to mention a couple of things. The last few months, we have seen unprecedented rises in the commodities such as oil, gas, and coal. I think you all have seen the effects of that when you open your electricity bill at the end of the month. It's a little bit shocking when you see how much power is costing right now. That is driven primarily by the fact that there's a war going on in Europe between the Ukraine and Russia. And unfortunately, that has caused a major disruption in the supply of fuel around the world. Just to give you a sense of what we're talking about, coal today is trading at around $400+ a ton. A year ago, we were buying the same amount of coal, 1 ton, at less than $100. So that's a huge, huge increase. Now, think about it this way. A year ago, I was paying $6 to $7 million for a 77,000 Panamax size vessel. That's 77,000 tons of coal, $6 to $7 million. Today, we're paying anywhere from 21 to 31 million. That cost is coming to us. Why? Because we obviously have to recover the cost of the fuel. Fuel is 70% of the cost of operating a power station, and the power rates are reflecting that, as I mentioned at the beginning. The other thing I wanted to mention before I, again, go into the presentation proper is the fact that I get asked this question a lot. Are we going to be okay power-wise? Do we have enough capacity? Do we have enough reserves? Do we have enough available capacity in the system? My answer is right now we're doing pretty okay. One reason for that is it's been raining a lot and the hydros are pretty full. So right now we have a lot of capacity in the system. Actually, we have more than enough at this point, which is great. Now, come the dry season, beginning next year, beginning of the year, things may be a little bit different. Why do I say that? Because we're not building anything new. If you look at the newspaper articles, there's a lot of press about different types of plants being considered, but nothing really is going on the ground at this point. It takes 3 to 4 years to build a power station. So although we may be sitting okay right now capacity-wise because we have plenty of rain and the hydros are full, come next year and the year after that, it'll be a little bit more challenging. We may not have enough at that point in time. So talking about the presentation proper. I chose the Philippines Power Market Challenge 2025 and beyond. Why did I choose 2025? Why? Because a lot of our current plants that have contracts, power supply agreements, will see those contracts lapsing in 2025. That's going to present an interesting challenge for a lot of us, myself included. One of our projects will have his PSA, or power supply agreement, lapsing in 2025. What role is the power station going to play after that? Who do I contract with? Am I going to go into the market and play the role of merchant? Am I going to find all the customers for it? Will I be able to land another long-term contract? You know, shareholders are looking for a steady revenue stream. And so for us, it's going to be a challenge. What happens to our power stations in 2025? Ours is not the only one. There are quite a few stations that are going to be in the same situation in 2025. The other thing is aging of the infrastructure. I'm not talking about myself. We never age, right? I'm talking about the infrastructure. A lot of these plants, in particular the combined cycles, will be reaching their end of the expected life. And at that point in time, as generators, we're faced with a couple of things. We can extend the life of the plant, but that means a significant cost to us. You know, if we're going to be refurbishing a plant, it takes quite a bit of money to do that. And so the question is, if you're not going to have an assured market, if you're not going to have an assured customer, would you want to be spending, you know, 20, 30, 40, $50 million to refurbish a plant? So that's a question, Mike. That's why I chose 2025 as the topic for my presentation today. The other reason I chose 2025 is, in some of you, as I look around, I'm sure you will be familiar with the song and the year 2025. Raise your hands if you know that the song I'm talking about. This is a 1969, so it's okay. You're not dating yourselves. I know the song quite well. And so 2025 again marks a major milestone in the power sector in the Philippines, and it's going to be interesting to see how we actually deal with that. So this is a view of our current facility. I think, as Philip was saying, we operate a couple of power stations. Both of the units are located side by side. The one in the background is actually QPL. The one in the forefront is SPPL. They're sitting side by side at the same site. One thing I'd like you to keep in mind, because I'll bring this up again later on throughout the presentation. This is a 1,000 megawatts facility. 1,000 megawatts sitting on less than 57 hectares. Keep that in mind, because later on I'll be talking about some of this and what the power densities actually mean. So on 57 hectares, you have 1,000 megawatts of power. Let's compare that later on against what it takes to have a wind facility or a solar facility and what the power densities will require you to do in terms of land. We have a dedicated pier, so we unload ships every couple of weeks. As I mentioned, we get 77,000 Panamax-sized vessels, and we unload the ships directly into our coal yard, and from there we put the coal in the boilers and produce electricity. Both units are fully contracted to Meralco, both of them on the long-term power supply agreements. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, the first one, QPL, will see its power supply agreement lapsing in 2025. The second one actually has 20 years to go from 2019 forward. So we got a ways to go yet. It's a very beautiful site. By the way, the land just to the right of the stack that you see there belongs to my good friends that are sitting on that table. We're actually neighbors. We try to be good neighbors, not to send anything over there that they don't want. But we've known each other for many years as well. So this is our site. This is QPL. This is SPPL. Just again, keep in mind the power density, 1,000 megawatts, 57 hectares. Okay, thanks. So this is the agenda I put together, just a few slides, and try to give everyone a sense for where the power sector is looking like right now and hopefully in the future. Talking about the current power basis assessment. I'll use some of the slides that actually the Department of Energy puts in their plan. Talk a little bit about the regulatory environment, which is very interesting here. Economic assumptions and demand forecasts, external pressures. As fossil fuel generators we have a lot of external pressures and internal pressures. Wholesale electricity spot market now and in the future. Some of the fuel challenges that we're seeing today and likely to see again in the future. The energy transition. You guys must have heard a lot about the energy transition. There's quite a bit of press about it. Now, Asian Development Bank has been very vocal about it. A lot of people are saying energy transition, we must transition away from fossil fuel into something else. And then at the end, I'll just have a simple slide that says it's my fearless forecast. And a conclusion. Again, that's my forecast. It's nothing any more than that. So can I move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the current power basis assessment, what's the energy situation in the Philippines? Right now, we're 52% coal. 52% coal. That is where we are. We're 30% natural gas. And the rest of it is renewables and others. And the others are include hydro, oil-based. 52% coal. Are we going to be replacing that 52% anytime soon with other technologies? It's a question that I ask myself almost every day. Talking about committed projects versus indicative projects. In the Philippines, we have an interesting situation when a developer like myself, David, his family, thinks about a project, has a concept about a project, says, I'm going to build a 200 megawatt solar facility, wind facility, coal fire facility. I'm sorry, coal no longer allowed in the Philippines. You actually write to the Department of Energy, you identify the project, you give it a name, and the Department of Energy will list that project in their files as an indicative project. You are required to report every month how you are actually moving forward with the development. If you fail to report 3 times in a row, you get disqualified and you get your name, the name of the project is taken off the list of the Department of Energy. At the moment you achieve financial closing and you're going to start construction, then the project turns into what is called a committed project. That means you actually are going to be building something, you're going to have a power plant out there, and the government recognizes that, and the Department of Energy will list you as a committed project. There's something called projects of national importance, and some people have actually been able to achieve that. It seems to be something that the Department of Energy and other agencies grant to developers that says you have achieved certain milestones and therefore we will consider you a project of national importance. I have yet to see, unfortunately, I have yet to see a project with this being built. So I'm not exactly sure what it means, but it's there. Aging infrastructure, as I mentioned at the beginning, in power supply agreements will be lapsing in 2025. Our plants are getting older. We're going to have to spend a lot of money if we want to keep them running, or if we think there's a role for them to play. If they don't get replaced, we may be in a very tight supply situation at that time. And remember, it takes 3 to 4 years to build a power station. Even a solar facility with batteries of any magnitude takes a while. You have to secure the land, you have to get all your permits in place. And by the time you actually put the plant into operation, it could be a couple of years. So keep that in mind, very important. I actually copy pasted this slide from the Department of Energy. This is the 2020 power situation report. By the way, the Department of Energy updates their plan every so many years. They don't do this every year because it's a huge report. It's like 250 pages. The new Secretary of Energy, Secretary Lutilla, would probably be taking this plan and updating the plan. So what I have on the screen right now is the system plan, which hasn't been updated yet. It will be updated, but just to give you a sense that the Department of Energy does put out these plans. They do look ahead, they do plan. And then on the basis of that, people like ourselves, David and others begin to develop power stations or power projects to follow the plans that the Department of Energy is laying out. This plan shows still the heavy dependence on coal. We're fossil fuel driven. There's no question about it. There's no 2 ways about it. You know, we are a fossil fuel driven energy mix. We got 52% is coal. And as you can see there's still some coal projects in the pipeline. Are they going to get built? Hard to say because securing financing for new coal is very difficult. Securing insurance for new coal is extremely difficult. So some of those projects may not actually get built. So what will take their place? Gas, potentially LNG, liquefied natural gas. We hear a lot about that on the paper, and eventually LNG may actually come in and replace our natural gas here, eventually, I said. So the impetus now appears to be mostly on renewable energy. And you might have seen over the last few days, a lot of press, a lot of articles about more renewable energy. There was a green energy auction recently. The government actually allocated 2,000 megawatts of renewable energy to different developers, suppliers. So it appears like we're abandoning fossil fuels for the most part. LNG is not here yet. We're focusing on renewable energy. And that brings a lot of interesting challenges to the equation. You know, can we actually live with just renewable energy in the future? Think about that. We're trying to switch from 52% fossil fuel, coal only, 30% gas, to potentially green energy via windmills, solar panels, plus batteries. That's going to be an interesting thing that I will not be around to see that here myself. I'll be retired by then. But some of you, especially the younger members of the Rotary Club, you guys are going to be facing this situation in the not too distant future. Talking about the regulatory environment, this is one of my favorite things and topics to talk about. Department of Energy, I think everyone knows the Department of Energy. What is it that they really do? They issue actually all the energy policies. And the plan that I just showed you is their creation. That's what they do. So they issue the energy policies, and then another entity called the Energy Regulatory Commission takes those policies and translates them into implementation rules and guidelines. So policies first, implementation rules and guidelines to follow. The DNR plays a major role. Every project in the Philippines requires an environmental impact assessment. You have to satisfy a number of conditions. You have to make sure your plan is not going to affect your neighbors, you're not going to damage the environment, you're not going to pollute the water. Rightfully so, a very important piece of documentation that you have to file. And this is DNR. Local government units. I never seen a local government unit have more power anywhere in the world, in the countries that I worked in, than the Philippines. A local government unit has the power to stop a project, has the power to say, go ahead with the project, has the power to say, before you build that project, you must do the following, the following, the following, the following. Local government units are hugely important in the Philippines. And I cannot emphasize how important it is to have a good relationship with the local government units if you want to build more, or if you have a problem. So something to keep in mind. The permitting process in the Philippines is fascinating. When we developed the second unit, San Buenaventura Power, this is the new supercritical coal-fired plant that was mentioned by Philip, it took 147 permits to actually start the construction. As an analogy, I'll tell you that the same unit in Thailand takes 40 permits. Now, I'm not complaining about the number of permits, I'm just stating a fact. It is what it is, and we have to deal with it, but it is very, very challenging. A lot of these permits are with agencies that overlap, and so you have to find your way. You almost need dedicated folks just to ensure you comply with all the permits that are required in order for you to start building a power station. And then after you build it, you commission, you have to get more permits in order to get into operation, more permits. I think we found an industry for permits in the Philippines. I wish we could make some money out of that, but unfortunately, I don't think we can do that. There's a strong, very strong, and rightfully so, a very strong renewable energy push. The government, the Philippines wants to see more renewable energy come on stream. There are a lot of companies that are very keen to more renewable energy. And I think having an energy mix that includes renewable energy makes a lot of sense. You don't want to be 100% fossil fuel. You don't want to be 100% coal. You want to have renewable energy. That brings though a big challenge, actually two big challenges. Renewable energy, for the most part, tends to be intermittent. The wind doesn't blow all the time, or doesn't blow when you want it to blow. I actually sat in a control room one time in Mexico City, and I was watching the power situation and the screens, and I saw 400 megawatts come off the screen like that. And I turned to the operator and I said, "What happened?" He says, "The wind stopped." The wind stopped. I said, "Wow!" And then 5 minutes later, I see this thing going up like a rocket. And I said, "What happened?" The wind started again. I said, "How do you guys manage a grid when you have fluctuations like that?" He said, "Sir, we have to have a lot of standby capacity ready to pick up those things." Meaning you have to have machines online that are there just to balance the grid when the wind stops blowing or if the sun stops shining. I visited one of our facilities in Thailand. We have a 60 megawatt solar facility, and it was fascinating. As an operator, as a tech, I love going into power stations and just looking at details. And I'm looking at the control screen and I see 25 megawatts. I said, "The plant is rated for 60. We have cloud cover." I said, "Great." Then all of a sudden it dropped to 17. I said, "What happened?" "Rain." I said, "Okay." Then it picked up again to 25. But this is within minutes. And I said, "Okay, what happened now?" Is the wind is blowing. So when the wind blows over the panels, it cools them down, you lose power. When the cloud cover comes on, you lose power. When it rains, you lose power. I said, so this unit is constantly moving up and down, and the grid operator sitting in the main control somewhere in the world is trying to balance all of these things. And imagine what happens when you have a lot of wind, when you have a lot of solar facilities in the system. The grid operator is going to have units on a standby ready to pick up that intermittency. So very important to keep that in mind. Most recently, you have seen some press. There are going to be potentially some offshore wind developments here in the country. The Philippines has started to be one of the best offshore wind sources in this part of the world. And there are companies that are actually going to be working on that. We have an experience with offshore wind sitting right now, unfortunately sitting in a very difficult spot, sitting right in the middle between Taiwan and China. And I think you guys know what's going on right now. We can't even go there right now. I don't even know if the windmills are going to be there by the time we get back. But it is a very challenging. Offshore wind is extremely challenging. Now, more so if you're going to be using floating foundations. It takes really a lot of engineering, a lot of know-how, specialized ships to build an offshore floating foundation. Doing them on shallow water, much easier. Doing them on shore, much easier. Try to do an offshore floating foundation. And I think you're going to find some real engineering challenges. Very few companies in the world can actually do that. But hey, you got to keep on trying. We have to get more renewables into the country. Okay, I'll run through this quickly. This is again from the power plant that the Department of Energy has put together. And you can see there predominantly, as I mentioned, we're coal driven. Natural gas coming right behind it. And then of course, the expectation is that there'll be more solar, more wind. And there have been some announcements recently about additional solar facilities, 200 megawatts here, 850 megawatts, 850 megawatts solar. Wow, that's dramatic. 850 megawatts, it takes 1 hectare of land per each megawatt. So you're talking about 850 hectares of land, as opposed to 57 hectares that I mentioned for 1,000 megawatts. The power densities don't quite line up. But hey, it's renewable energy. So eventually, hopefully it'll make its way in. But 850 megawatts. To provide 850 megawatts of mid-merit capacity, you need about 1,000 megawatts worth of batteries. And you need about 2,000 megawatts worth of solar panels, because the idea is that the sun will shine somewhere, and therefore between the 2,000 megawatts of solar panels and the batteries, you should be able to deliver 850 megawatts. But think about the amount of real estate, land that you're going to require for that. And you still deal with the intermittency. And the second item that is very important for renewable energy, in particular offshore, transmission. We just don't have the transmission system needed. I mentioned this morning, one of the things that I see in the United States, we have extremely good winds in the mid part of the United States. It's an amazing wind resource, really. The wind is always blowing. Unfortunately, our load centers are on the West Coast and the East Coast. And we have no transmission to take the power from those facilities. So we end up spilling power inside the local facilities because we don't have the ability to transmit it. We may be facing a similar situation here. Great wind resources. We can build the offshore wind. We can build the onshore wind. We can build solar. How are we going to get that power to the load centers? That is a question. How are we going to get the transmission lines ready to take that much additional power that is intermittent or best? This is something we've been working on with an outfit in Hong Kong called the Lantau Group. Lantau Group is one of those outfits that can help you look at the market. They do market forecasting. They're actually quite knowledgeable of the Philippines, and we use them a lot. And most of this is designed to help us figure out what the role of QPL is going to be post 2025. Where do we fit? Who are we going to be competing against? Where do we find a niche that we can put our plan in? We see more solar, we see more wind, and potentially LNG. But as I mentioned, and I'll talk about this a little bit more later on, LNG is very, very difficult to secure right now because of what's going on in Europe. bringing LNG right now is major challenge. Again, this is part of the effort that we're making to try and find what I call a contracting window for QPL after it power supply agreement lapses. We're almost beginning to think that the only way we'll have a role for the unit is to be a merchant operator. What does that mean? That means I'm a price taker. That means I will submit my bid every day, hope to get dispatch, and if I get dispatch, whatever the market clears that day is what I get. So it may be that in one day I can make a little bit of money. The next day I may make no money. The third day may be that I don't want to run because I'm going to burn fuel and I can't even recover the cost of the fuel. That's what we see in other places when you have a lot of merchant capacity in the system. So it is going to be very, very challenging. Despite the pandemic, despite what happened in 2019, 2020, the economic growth of the Philippines is still phenomenal. It's an amazing thing. I'm listening to the BSP, I'm listening to economists, and they're all talking about 6 to 7% economic growth for the Philippines, which is pretty amazing compared to what we see in other countries. Myself in the US, I mean, we're not seeing anything near that. If we hit 2% in the United States, I think we'll be doing good. Industrial demand is increasing. Residential demand is increasing. We're actually forecasting that the growth for the need for power is about 4 to 5% per annum. 4 to 5% growth. Now, remember what I said at the beginning, plants are aging. We're going to have to figure out what we're going to do with them. We're going to have to refurbish them. Meanwhile, the growth, the demand is increasing. How are we going to satisfy that? Where do we start building power stations to replace the ones that are going to be retired? And how do we compensate for this? So it's a very, very interesting challenge. All of this is pretty dynamic as well. Manufacturing, we don't have a lot of heavy manufacturing in the Philippines, but we do have a lot of companies that are doing semiconductors, that are doing very precise manufacturing that requires the quality of the power to be quite good. And the question that I ask myself is, how do I provide quality power, that is very reliable with a lot of renewable energy that may be intermittent? It's a question that if I was an investor, if I was going to come into the country and I'm trying to place my shop here, I would question, how do I assure myself? Maybe I'll have a dedicated power plant just for me. That way I can be assured that the power quality is always going to be there and the power supply is always going to be there. I'm sure a lot of investors are looking at that and wondering, is this at the right place to locate? I hope they are. I hope they do look at us and say, yeah, these guys know exactly what they're doing and we need to go and install our shops in the Philippines. We're an investment rating country. I'm amazed that, we are, economic growth is good. The projections are fine. The demand for power is growing, and Standard & Poor's and Fitch are all giving us investment grade rating. So we have the ability to borrow money, build power stations, all that. That's great. I mean, there's a lot of confidence still in the Philippine power sector. Despite all the challenges that I have mentioned, there's still a lot of silver lining. Investment grade country still. That makes it very attractive for a lot of folks like myself, that want to do more power here in the Philippines. Again, this is a little bit of what I mentioned earlier, the Philippine Energy Plan 2020-2040. Secretary Lotilla is going to have a lot of fun coming in, and he's going to look at this plan and he's going to have to revise it, and that will give us some guidelines, and hopefully some of the things that he decides to put in the next plan will make it very attractive for development to start here again. Let's hope that is the case. Two wonderful choices that the current administration have made in the energy sector. One is naming Secretary Lotilla, who's an experienced energy person, and then naming Attorney Mona de la Mantan as the new chair of the Energy Regulatory Commission. Two great choices. I think the power market is going to benefit from both of them. I thought I'd throw this in. You might recognize the gentleman sitting in the middle of that picture. That's the former President Duterte. He actually graced the dedication ceremony for our new unit, SBPL San Buenaventura Power. He made a speech and he actually was very pleasant. So we took the opportunity to memorialize that occasion, and I just wanted to throw that in just to show you that, hey, he did support SBPL at the time. This was before the coal moratorium came in, by the way. There's a coal moratorium in the Philippines now. We're not allowed to build any new coal. Coal is out of the question. So no more coal units. Okay, talking about external pressures, I think I mentioned COP26, and I think some of you nodded when I said that. You know, this took place in Glasgow not that long ago. I think a lot of people were there, and out of this, we heard something like there's an energy transition mechanism. And folks like the Asian Development Bank came out and say, by God, we're going to be buying all the coal-fired plants and we're going to be retiring them. We're like, oh, that's quite interesting. When? How? We haven't actually put pencil to paper on that yet, but it's something we're working on. So when you hear about the energy transition mechanism, there's still a ways to go. When we question the ADB about it, they say, we're looking at a time horizon of 15 years. So it'll take 15 years before actually they think they can retire coal. That's quite a bit of time. Intended national determination contribution. The Philippines was one of the first countries that went to Paris during the Paris Climate Agreement, and they say, we will reduce greenhouse gas emissions to the tune of 95% by 2045, 2050. Something like that, 2045, 2050. What this means is countries making a commitment will reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, but how, where? We don't know. The details are still to be developed. So a lot of great things that I put in paper, but unfortunately, not a lot of details yet. Financing and insurance, as I mentioned, anytime we develop a power station, especially fossil fuel now, we're getting a lot of difficulty getting financing. A lot of companies don't want to finance fossil fuel anymore. Never mind coal. Coal is out of the question. Insurance. My underwriters are now saying, we've been told by our bosses we need to walk away from coal, Frank. Can't support coal anymore. Coal is bad. I said, but I haven't claimed anything. I operated the plant for 22 years. Haven't had a single claim. What's the risk? It's coal. But I'm paying you $4 million a year premium, free money. You don't pay me anything back. It's coal. Not much we can do about that. I said, try to persuade them that we're a good risk and we'll give you more money if you insure me. And hopefully they will do that. And then the last thing is, this is the syndrome that we see in a lot of countries. As we develop power stations, how many of you guys have seen this before? NIMBY, not in my backyard. You know, everybody says, I like power. I want good power, reliable power. And I said, great, I'm going to install a plant next to you, Rodrigo. And the first thing Rodrigo says, not in my backyard. You go find another place, go figure another location for your power station, not in my backyard. We're facing this. We're trying to do more projects here in the Philippines, and this is already coming up. Not in my backyard. Just a few more challenges. Wholesale electricity spot market, you guys are pretty familiar with this. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes because I want to highlight a couple of things, and David will attest to this. Western is working really well. EPIRA mandated this, and the market is there. You can go into the market, you can sell into the market, you can buy it from the market, you can buy power. One major change that was made this year, it used to be a 1 hour interval market, meaning as a generator, you were told to change your load potentially every hour. The market decided we want to go to 5 minutes interval. So every 5 minutes, your load can actually move. If you ever operate a power station or know anything about power stations, we're very slow to move up and down. Not easy. Anytime you do that, you got to shut down a lot of things. And then if they give you a ramp up, then you got to go the other way. That puts us a lot of wear and tear on the plants. You're stressing the plants. The plants were not designed for this. But we had no choice. We had to follow the market requirement. If you don't follow the market dispatch requirement, you get penalized. If you complain, they say, well, and that's the case, then don't run. So you're not given a lot of choices. When you hear a lot about power stations coming offline, they count out. That's a term that is used here. They count out, especially during the summer months. And you say, wow, they didn't do maintenance, maybe they didn't buy parts. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we are overusing the units. They were not designed for that. You know, whether it's a gas-fired plant or coal-fired plant, anytime you run into a market that changes loads every 5 minutes, you put the plant at risk. And eventually it breaks down. So people shouldn't be surprised when power plants go on forced outages. That's the reason. Renewable energy integration coming on board. Here's a train coming down the line. And, you know, we're going to see more and more of this. And the question that I ask myself is, how is the grid going to support that? How is the grid going to be able to transmit that power? How is the grid going to be able to balance the intermittency? Are we going to set up a market like they do in the United Kingdom and Australia, where you pay plants to stand by, so that when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, you call on these plants and you pay them to stand by? So now you have two charges. You have the original charge plus a backup. That's going to be interesting. Meralco, largest distribution utility in country, my customer, we love them. They're great, but the biggest game in town. A lot of us developers are chasing after them for potential contracts. And of course, they have a limited amount of capacity for that. So it'd be interesting to see what they actually do in the future. This is something that I have used many times in the past. You know, we're an archipelago country, 7,600 islands. Actually, a lot of people, when I mention this in power gen conferences in Texas and other places, go like, wow, you really know the Philippines? I said, well, just look at a map. It doesn't take more than that. Blessed with a lot of natural resources. We have a lot of great resources in country. Perfect example right here. Great resources, smart people, skilled people. Fuel, unfortunately, is not. We don't have oil. We don't have much gas. Malampaya, you know, is already beginning to taper down. Capacity for Malampaya is dwindling. We import most of our fuel. And that exposes us, the Philippines is exposed to that volatility. That's what we're seeing right now, $400 a ton coal as opposed to 100. LNG at $40 a million BTUs from 4. That's just crazy increases. How can we deal with that? Try to contract for LNG to come to the Philippines now. There are some companies that have projects on the way. They're building combined cycles that are going to be firing on LNG. Some that are losing Malampaya because Malampaya is no longer producing as much gas, or running on condensate, gas condensate, which is just liquid that comes out with the gas when you get it out of the ground. Looking for LNG. We're knocking on doors. I'd like to buy some LNG. Why would I want to sell you LNG? I can sell it all in Western Europe right now. They don't even ask me for a price. That's what we're facing. We have been trying to contract for LNG. We're not the only ones. There's no LNG coming this way anytime soon. The market is distorted. The market is volatile. So if you're going to build a power station today and you're going to fire with LNG, it may take a while before you actually get the molecules here, because just simply not available. So, and we're competing on top of that. We're competing with very structured markets like Japan, China, who's buying all the LNG that is available out there. We went to the Qatari, sorry, no LNG. We went to Australia, sorry guys, no LNG. Mate, actually they said no LNG, mate. US, you know, amazing. We have plenty of gas in the US. All of it is going to Western Europe right now. I find it fascinating what Western Europe is doing. I don't know if you've seen the papers. Germany decided to shut down their nukes. Their nukes are perfectly running units, but they made a commitment. By God, we're going to shut down the nukes. You know what they're doing now? Refiring their coal-fired plants. And what are they using? Lignite, brown coal. This is the worst possible coal you can, but because they decided to shut the nukes down, and by God, we're German. We follow our commitments. I'm German, by the way, half percent. So, although I'm not that optimistic about it. I'm half Colombian, half German. They're firing lignite plants. I have seen that. I've been in Germany. I actually visited a lignite fire station, and I was amazed because this is, have you guys seen lignite? It's just basically dirt. I have a hard time thinking of coal that way because it doesn't even look like coal. It's brown, it's losing, you know, roots and grass and pebbles, and that's what's actually being used, as opposed to running perfectly good, emission-free nuclear units. But they made a commitment, and by God, they're German. They're going to do it no matter what. So Malampaya, dwindling capacity, LNG must come in and replace that gas. I think it's going to be a while. I put the statements together just for fun. I wanted to see your reaction on that. There's no right or wrong on any of these things, but I'm just curious to see. You can do it by a show of hands if you like. You agree with the first statement? The volatility of fossil fuel market poses obstacles to the stability and long-term security of economic growth. That sounds like what a politician would say, right? You guys agree with that statement? There's no right or wrong. It's just, I just want to have a little bit of fun. The second one, and there's a great book about this with the same title. Is there a moral case to be made for the continued use of fossil fuels? Think about that. We have the last 100 years enjoyed all the benefits of using fossil fuels. Everything that you see around you, your mobiles, the plates, everything is made with carbon. Now we're saying, we should leave that on the ground, guys. So is there a moral case to be made for the continued use of fossil fuels? What are we going to do with the 900 million people that don't have access to electricity? We're going to tell them, go ahead and get a panel, go ahead and get a windmill. Poor guy in Zimbabwe, we're saying, hey, you can't benefit the same way we did. You know, can't have prosperity the same way we did. We want you to be green instead. So here's a solar panel, here's a windmill, go benefit that way. So is there a moral case to be made for the continued use of fossil fuels? Yes, no? No, okay. That's great, I love that. That's good, thank you. Liquefied natural gas may not be the most effective energy transition fuel. You've heard that statement before. LNG is the transition fuel. This is what we're going to be using. We're going to get rid of bad coal, and we're going to be using LNG, and we're going to transition into cleaner energy that way. Is really that the case, considering that there's no LNG available? We cannot bring it in. We cannot buy it. The market is completely upside down. Is that really the case? Anybody agree with that? Yes? Okay. And then the last one, this was one of my favorites, is how real is hydrogen? You know, as a reliable fuel. How many of you heard President Bush twice? Hydrogen is the next economy, the next world economy is going to be fueled by hydrogen. Hydrogen, hydrogen, hydrogen. Have you heard that before? Toyota is developing cars to run on hydrogen. Would you like to drive a car fueled by hydrogen? Hydrogen is highly volatile, tends to explode, doesn't like to be confined, makes the metal brittle. Would you like to ride at 65 miles an hour, sitting on top of a tank with hydrogen? Hydrogen is touted as the most widely available element in the universe. In the universe, not here. We have to make hydrogen. There's no natural hydrogen. We have to make hydrogen. How do we make hydrogen today? We use methane steam reforming. That creates gray hydrogen. We use a lot of, we actually generate a lot of carbon emissions because of that. But there are a lot of smart guys out there saying, hey, we can do green hydrogen. Let's electrolyze seawater using renewable energies such as solar panels, windmills, and we're going to make green hydrogen that doesn't emit anything. I said, perfect. How much is that going to cost? Because now you have the electrolyzers, you have the power. When you add all of that against gray hydrogen, the cost of a kilo of gray hydrogen is $1. The cost of green hydrogen is $6. Would you be buying any green hydrogen for your car when you get your hydrogen fuel card next? Not likely. Would you go out there and say, I want green hydrogen in my fuel tank? I probably don't want green hydrogen at all. And then the question is, are you going to make enough hydrogen? Are you going to be able to bring it across? How are you going to get it from one country to another? It presents a lot of interesting challenges, but it's a great topic, and you're going to hear more about green hydrogen. By the way, the Philippines signed a memorandum of agreement or understanding with an Australian company that's developing green hydrogen. So we're looking to bring green hydrogen into the Philippines at some point, right? That appears to be the case. Anyway, just good fun. Thank you for that. Let me move to the Okay, this is this is my feelers forecast. Again, this is my forecast. Is nothing else. I think there's still a lot of great opportunities, and I think the investment climate in the Philippines remains very, very positive. Despite everything that I said, and I didn't want to be negative, I wanted to be a little bit balanced, but I wanted to give you guys a good understanding of what the power sector is looking at. There's still some great opportunities here. More and more on the renewable energy side. Quite why? Because the government is pushing for that, and the government decides to go in that direction. Things are going to help it, and eventually we'll get more and more renewables into the mix. I put a question mark on the last one. I think you heard the current president, Mr. Marcos, is very positive on nuclear energy. Are we really going to see nuclear energy coming into the country? Some countries in the world have been very successful with nuclear energy because it's carbon emission free, base load power, very reliable. France has been very, very successful with that. Sweden runs most of their energy mix is nuclear. Great opportunities here, but the cost associated with nuclear energy, I don't think private investors can actually shoulder that cost. I think without government support, difficult to imagine that we're going to see any nuclear plants here. I get asked a lot of questions too about the Bataan plant. People ask me, because I've been there, by the way, I visited the plant. I actually work in 3 nuclear stations in my life. And I don't glow at night. I don't have my own glow. If you're wondering about that. And the answer has always been, that plant has been sitting idle for more than 35, 36 years. It may look okay on the outside, but what's inside is really what counts. Do you really want to spend $2-3 billion refurbishing a plant like that? You may be better off spending the money and building a new power station. And that may be the way to go. Small modular reactors, that's the hottest thing now. Everybody's talking about small modular reactors. The United States has got some designs already approved by the regulator, NuScale, Hitachi, General Electric, everybody's jumping on the bandwagons. Small modular reactors, we're going to build them in a shop. And it's going to be totally encapsulated like a thermos bottle. And we're going to bring the whole thing in a truck. And we're just going to put them on the ground. And by God, if you need 100 megawatts, that's 100 megawatts. If you need 200, just put 2 bottles. 300 megawatts, put 3 bottles on the ground. It's as simple as that, right? The devil is in the details. We'll see how that actually comes about. We have some interesting things up ahead. I'll leave you with this quote. This is one of my favorite quotes from Yogi Berra. I don't know how many of you know Yogi Berra. He's a phenomenal baseball player in the United States. He was known for some what I call quirky statements. He used to say things like, if you come to a fork in the road, take it. Well, that's pretty profound. And in this case, he says something that stays with me the whole time. It's tough to make predictions, especially about the future. So with that, I leave you. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. Our websites are, sorry, can I see the last slide? Our websites are listed there. By the way, we do a lot more than produce power. If you're interested to see what are some of the other things that we do, and my neighbors will tell you what are some of the things we do. We have a lot of CSR activities for our community. We're a good neighbor. We pay taxes, not to the bad guys. We pay taxes to the right authorities. Have a look inside. You're going to find us there. If you get a chance to it, there's nothing on Netflix you want to watch and you want to see something entirely different. I welcome you to visit our websites. Thank you again. With that, we have to take any questions, or David.
Yeah. So first of all, I'd like to point out, I'm the head of our commercial renewables group, right? So I agree with a lot of what he said. I do have to put that. It's really all about a balance, right? A lot of people point fingers at each other, renewables versus thermal. That's not necessarily the case. You've got to be pragmatic about the situation, especially in the Philippines, right? I'd really like to highlight a few things that I think Frank touched on that are critical for the Philippines itself, regardless of the technology, right? Energy affordability. We are a developing nation that needs to attract foreign direct investment, increase our GDP per capita. Affordability needs to be key. We can't be paying the $6 for the green hydrogen. We've got to have affordable power. Then it is energy security. We need to ensure that we have the supply in the Philippines, right? We need to have the ample supply of cheap base load power, as well as mid-merit peaking, all sorts of different things. Next up is energy sustainability and self-sustainability. I say that not necessarily from an RE perspective, but I mean, the environment itself, the framework itself, the ability to generate ourselves, as well as the RE side. And that's also the rule of law, honoring contracts that people enter into, right? There can't be changing the game after the fact, after you entered the contracts. We've really got to honor that when firms make commitments, honor that for the people, not change it halfway through. So yeah, I think that's very critical. Frankly, all my talking points, I want to crumple up and throw in the trash can because you've addressed just about everything on them. In terms of RE, in terms of natural gas, transition fuels, nuclear, I think you brought up some points there. One question I had to start things off is, RE is definitely part of the solution. What do you anticipate in the medium term as a kind of a bridge? You mentioned in your fearless forecast some of your points about natural gas not being a transition. There is a part to play for RE. I'd like to hear your thoughts on that for everybody here and how it is valuable to the Philippines and perhaps its limitations, which I believe you've touched on as well.
Well, I think, thanks, that's a great question. I think I have mentioned, I think renewable energy is being pushed quite a bit by the government, and I think we owe to ourselves to support the government in the direction that they want to go with renewable energy. I think there will be quite a few opportunities in that regards, and the government is certainly trying to incentivize more renewable energy sources to come into the mix. What I would caution against is the fact that we do need the transmission system to support it, and we do need a way to balance the intermittency. Otherwise, two things will happen: is we may build renewable energy, but we won't be able to convey it to the right load centers, and the other one is the grid will be quite unstable if they cannot balance the amount of renewable energy that we're looking to bring into the country. I think there's room, and I think we should support it, and I think we should promote it as much as possible. But I think it's important that when we talk to people like the Department of Energy, the Regulatory Commission, the DNR, and so on, that they understand that the intricacies of trying to bring lots and lots of renewable energy into the country, and how do we manage both the intermittency and the transmission. I think it's important that on the developers world that we kind of focus on that, just to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where there's a lot of renewable not going anywhere or having to be spilled because there's no place to carry it to, and then the grid is extremely unstable as a result of that. But so a lot of opportunities, and I do believe we ought to support the government in that direction.
Thank you. Any questions from the group?
Frank, you mentioned that Germany made a commitment to do away with their nuclear power. What was the reason for their doing that?
They made that commitment. Chancellor Merkel made that commitment. She was pushed in that direction by members of the Green Party. And the reason for that is, you guys are familiar with the incident, the tsunami that affected the power stations in Fukushima Daiichi. After that, there was a lot of public outcry about nuclear power plants. How nuclear power plants are so dangerous, we need to shut down. And so the chancellor at that time bowed to the Green Energy Party and decided that, by God, we're going to shut them down. Now, a lot of ministers, a lot of governments are saying to Germany, why don't you refire the nuclear power plants? You're struggling with energy right now. You don't have enough energy. You're firing lignite coal-fired plants. You have perfectly good nukes. Go ahead and put them on the way again. But it was a decision made by the government. Chancellor Merkel made that decision. And they're pushing forward. They actually shut down 3 of the units. They got, I believe, 2 or 3 more. And they're actually saying they're going to shut them down at the end of this year, despite the fact that they need that power and it's carbon free. But it's all because of the emotional baggage, I guess, that they attached to what happened in Fukushima Daiichi.
But what is your opinion about, the Philippines adopting or using nuclear power?
I think I think the Philippines should look at all possible fuel sources. If you look at nuclear power, it's carbon free. Now, it's not inexpensive. It's very expensive to build a nuclear power plant, especially if you build a big one. But if you look into the small modular reactors, there may be an opportunity. Philippines is an archipelago. We can actually put small modular reactors in different islands and replace the diesel fire generation that you got there, or oil fire generation with that. Now, having said that, you need to train people. You need to make sure it's done properly. Nuclear power is very reliable. I worked in 3 stations. I'm a firm believer in nuclear power. I'm a member of the American Nuclear Society, by the way. So I believe in that. But it's not something that should be taken lightly. It's not the same as building a combined cycle burning LNG or coal fire plant. It takes a very rigorous, methodical process, and you need really good people behind that. If you do it properly, it can be very, very positive. Sweden is a case in point. France is a case in point. They got amazing nuclear systems there, very reliable, very inexpensive. I mean, power in France is running at 4 to 5 cents, and next door, Germany is running at 33 cents. One decided to go nuclear, the other decided to go differently.
Yeah, anyway, my last point is, can you comment on the waste, the nuclear waste, the management of that, and where is all of this spent nuclear fuel being stored?
Absolutely, I'm happy to do that. Actually, we kind of are our own worst enemies when it comes to dealing with nuclear waste. Right now, most of the power stations around the world are taking their spent fuel, which, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but every 18 months you refuel a reactor. And unfortunately, you only spend about 30% of the fuel. So 70% of the fuel is still fine. You just have to refurbish it and make it go again. And in Europe, they actually do that. They take spent fuel rods and they redo them, and then they use the fuel again. In the United States, we're not allowed to do that because the government many years ago decided that will lead to the ability to create plutonium, and plutonium can lead to undesirable bombs and all that. So we abandoned that idea, unfortunately. So power stations are the one that I worked on. We kept all the spent fuel and lead cask inside the spent fuel pool, waiting for a repository. We've been talking about the Yucca Mountain Repository, which is in Nevada. It actually is a perfect solution. We can put these things on the ground and let cast, temperature control, and they'll stay there for the next few years. So there are ways to handle that. You can either refurbish the fuel if you like to refurbish the fuel, or you can store it. Right now we're storing. But just to give you an idea, we have 94 power stations, nuclear plants in the United States, currently operating still. The amount of spent fuel that we have among all those power stations doesn't fill the stadium. So the quantity is very small at the end of the day. Now, we need to find a repository, yes, but it takes people that want to do something to make that happen. If you find a repository, you're going to be able to do it. Small modular reactors will face exactly the same thing. You have to find a place to store it. In the meantime, you can store it in the spent fuel pools. You can put it in lead casks, so it's perfectly protected. Sorry?
Javier, I would like to talk about what you mentioned about the morality about keeping on punishing products made out of fossil fuels.
Right. The moral case, is there a moral case to continue using fossil fuels?
I thought you were.
It's a good book, by the way.
I thought you were going to comment on the morality behind what these treaties have been creating for underdeveloped countries. These are developing countries. Developed countries were developed based on this coal-fired energy.
Right.
But now they are putting like a burden on developing countries not to use that energy, and the Philippines only contribute to it with less than 1% of the footprint in the world. Is only 0.35% actually.
Yeah.
And then by imposing them not to use any more coal fire, they are stopping somehow these countries from developing.
Yes.
So it doesn't make any sense. And who can defend this position of these countries in the worldwide conventions?
Well, that's exactly the point. That's why I put that up there. Is there a moral case for the continued use of fossil fuels? We're telling countries that didn't benefit from 100 years of using fossil fuel the US economy, the United Kingdom economies of the world, large economies, develop on the back of fossil fuels. There's no question about that. It doesn't take a lot of understanding about that. We develop on the back of fossil fuels. And now we're telling the other guys that are trying to develop, you can't do that. You're gonna be bad if you do coal. You gotta run on green power. so yeah. Exactly. I would submit that instead of telling people don't use fossil fuels, let's use fossil fuels, find the right solution to adapt, because obviously there's a lot of concern about climate change and what it might do to the world. We're very good about adapting. We survive for billions and billions of years by adapting. So maybe there's an opportunity to do something with that. Thanks.
Yeah. Frank, David raised two good points about the affordability and security of our source of energy. As you know, the Philippines is known to be one of the biggest producer of geothermal. And of course, renewable energy like solar. May we know as a roadmap, what do you think the Philippines should do, the Philippine government should do to develop these major sources of renewable energy, geothermal and solar?
Well, I think the Philippines does have a few sites that are very good for geothermal, and we do have a few plants that are running on geothermal energy. I think it's by the way, we also own geothermal assets in other countries. So we believe that geothermal energy is quite viable. Geothermal energy though has limitations, unfortunately. I don't know if you know this, but it takes about $5 million to drill a well. And you're not sure if you're really going to find the source that you need in order to have a power station. So that's a challenge. The other one is location. A lot of these geothermal sites are pretty far away from load centers. So I go back to what I said earlier. Developing the resource is one thing. Transmitting the power to the load centers where you actually need it is something that needs to be considered. I'm a firm believer that an energy mix should include everything. Should include renewable energy, should include geothermal facilities, wind, all of that. Just make sure that when you develop a project, you have the transmission system, you have the way to ensure that it's not going to disturb the grid to the point where you're going to have backup energy and pay for that backup energy to stand by. In the United Kingdom, one of my plants there, I was paid to stand by. And you know what? I was the happiest guy in town. I had nothing to do and I was collecting money. And every now and then somebody, the dispatcher will say, oh, you got to ramp up. Okay, no problem, ramp up. Love that. They were paying me to stand by. Are we going to go in that direction? If we're looking to make energy costs lower, having that, where you have to pay somebody to stand by in addition to the power rates, that's not going to be very sustainable, not for very long.
I think I can also jump in on the geothermal, given we've got two very large plants in our portfolio that have been operating since, I believe, late 60s, early 70s, and still kicking. The challenger, Frank hit the nail on the head, exploration costs, tremendous amount of risk. It's not like oil and gas, significantly harder to go. A lot of chemistry involved with the salinity, sulfur levels, all of that. So even if you hit something, it may not be viable. And there's very, very huge dry hole risk. Very hard. Another point is transmission. A lot of these areas are very, very far off, remote areas where in addition to transmission, you've also got a lot of IP, indigenous people, communities in that area where to drill these wells, you have pipes. I don't know if any of you guys have been to Macban, Laguna, not too far away. We've got a plant there. And if you go, it's a very interesting community. It's a free lavanderia because people are using the steam pipes throughout the town to dry their clothes, all of that. And in a developed area, it can make a lot of sense, but in ancestral domains, all of that, some people may not necessarily want all the pipes, but those are generally a lot of the conditions you see for geothermal. Yes, yeah. But it's a phenomenal source of energy. We're still operating the plant. It's been operating for 40, 50 years already. Clean, great energy, but very, very hard to develop. And I believe a majority of the very large scale ones in the Philippines were developed already by the government. And the risk was taken by the government, and the private companies such as ourselves, EDC, own them as a result of a lot of the privatization that's gone on in the government. So previously, a lot of the risk was borne by back then when it was being developed.
Well, it's a remarkable resource, no question about it. But as David pointed out, it's difficult to find it. It's difficult to drill. It's expensive to drill. The brine that comes out of the ground sometimes very, very aggressive. I mean, I've seen units completely eaten up by the brine that came out of the ground. That's happened. Sorry.
Well, I think the earlier questions were mostly the future,
Okay.
dreams, renewable, nuclear, etc. I think my question is more down to earth now. I'm just baffled with the data that we're getting from yours and from our own reports. No? Well, we happen to run a small electric company with Michael and David. And in fact, in our last meeting, capacity right now is at a low of 18,000 megawatts. That's the report we got. What is being utilized is something like 16,000. So the slack or the reserve is very low, considering that you have to maintain, contend with breakdowns, contend with lack of fuel. So the reading we're getting is it's very, very critical. No? And this is to us very critical because we're running operations right now. All right. And so I see also in your chart that there's 33,000 megawatts in the works. Okay. I remember 10 years ago when I was in government, there was a plan for 30,000 megawatts in 2030. I would say 30% of that would be renewable. At that time, 10 years ago, solar and wind were still somewhat
in the future.
Somewhat in the future. No? So just like Yogi Berra said, it was hard to predict. But anyway, now, my coincidence, yesterday I was reading the papers. I still read the newspapers, hard copy. And I clicked because I knew we were going to have this meeting today.
Yeah.
And it says government hikes new renewable energy installations target to 52,000 megawatts. I'll give this to David. This is talking of 2040. So apparently they had adjusted the 2030 target to this time. I'm amazed because 10 years ago, we were just talking of 30,000 megawatts for 2030. They're talking of 100,000 megawatts for 2040. I'm sure you're aware of this report.
I've seen the articles.
All right. My question is this feasible? Or first of all, is it realistic to expect a target of 100,000 megawatts for the kind of GDP development we're getting? In Korea right now, they have 100,000 megawatts, but they're a member of the Trillionaires GDP Club. South Korea's GDP is over $1 trillion per annum. The Philippines, of course, is struggling at 350 to 400,000 billions. No? So my question really is this a pipe dream or sort of fake news? You're targeting 100,000 mega and your GDP is only growing so fast. We're not very efficient in growing our GDP, unfortunately. And so my question really is, what do you think of this kind of projections?
That's actually a very good question. Here's what I can say, and I've seen this in other places. People make statements, we're going to build 70,000 megawatts of non-fossil energy in the next few years. India will tell you that. China will tell you that. Many people will say things like that. A lot of countries also look at something like that as an aspirational goal to try and elicit funding. There are a lot of funds in Western Europe and Europe and the United States that are ready to invest. So when they hear, we're going to develop 50,000 megawatts of renewable energy in the Philippines, but we just need financing. some of these funds will jump into that and say, I can offer that finance and I can give you that. You're going in the right direction. You're going to leave fossil fuel on the ground. You're going to transition into renewable energy. The reality is we're pretty far from anything like that. If you think about it, we are a 23,000 megawatt system. The idea of building 50,000, 60,000 megawatts of renewable energy, it just doesn't equate. It's not real. So a lot of these are aspirational goals. A lot of these things are designed to say we're in the right direction. I need financing for some of these things. I think that's the way I interpret those things. How many of those things will actually happen and become reality? How many of those plans will actually become mainstream? Doubtful that there will be some, but certainly not 20,000, not 30,000, not 40,000. That's just not going to happen. We don't even have that in the States, right now. And we're trying to develop offshore wind in the States, and there's a lot of opposition, especially in places like Nantucket, Cape Cod, where all these folks that have multi-million-dollar homes are now saying, "Would I want to look at a windmill in front of my beautiful house? Of course not. Go put that thing somewhere else. Go to the Rocky Mountains or somewhere."
Put them in buggy.
The NIMBY syndrome. So it's not likely to happen, but it's an aspirational goal. Absolutely.
To add to that, from historical context of growth rate, so the country's grown historically around 6.5% a year.
Mhm.
We've seen the commensurate megawatt demand growth between 600 to 800 megawatts per year, tied to that 6.5% growth. That's base load. So about 600 to 800 megawatts are needed per year if we average about a 6.5% growth rate.
Yeah, and that's why I made the statement during the presentation. We have to worry not only about the continued growth in demand, which is 4 to 5% per annum, but also what happens when the plants begin to age and they're no longer as reliable, and we may have to retire or refurbish them. Are we going to make that investment? If we're not building anything right now, what's going to happen in 2025?
You mentioned about Germany starting coal plants.
Yes.
With a very poor coal.
Yes.
But 3 years ago, Germany announced that every house in Germany have used solar panel successfully and have closed down all of their coal plants and was thinking of even closing the atomic energy plants.
Yes.
So you are now saying there is a change, but they have been very successful in getting every house with a solar panel.
Yes.
To close down many of these coal plants. Yet,
At 37 cents per kilowatt hour. That's the problem. 37 cents per kilowatt hour. It should be 6 to 7 cents. It's 37 cents. Germany was very successful for a while. The energy Wende, energy transition, I think you may be familiar with the term. They have lots of wind in the northern part of the country, nothing in the south. So they decided to build this magnificent corridor to transmit the power from the north to the south at a cost of 7 billion euro. They're still building it. In the meantime, all these rates are going up. Meantime, the world changed. The war started in Ukraine, Russia, all of a sudden the gas is not coming in. Germany is in a predicament. High power prices, not enough capacity. They're now figuring out, and I do worry about my family in Germany. What's going to happen in the winter time? Remember, Germany, like a lot of countries in Western Europe, requires district heating during the winter. The winters are pretty fierce there. How are they going to manage that? There's no gas. You know what they're doing right now? They're running coal-fired plants so they can save the gas. But they could be running the nukes, save even more gas. They're not doing that, unfortunately. So it is, I think they're being victimized by the market in a sense. Hey, Keith.
Hi. Do you think nuclear power is properly priced? You talked about this 33 cents in Germany versus 5 or 7 cents in France,
yes,
where they have 70% nuclear power.
Yes.
But when we've looked at this war and we've seen that an army can come in and take over a nuclear power station and start shooting rockets from there because they know that nobody wants to fire back in case they hit a reactor by mistake.
Right.
there are things you can insure for. You can insure for an environmental accident or some other accident anyway, but there's normally no insurance for something like a war. And is there some price that means that it's just the wrong price? 5 or 7% cents is just too low.
That's a great comment, Keith. And, the thing is, obviously, we're relying on common sense. Who would have imagined that Mr. Putin was going to attack the Ukraine and put so many people in danger and kill so many people, and so many soldiers have been killed? Nobody expected that. And you're right, they are making use of the nuclear plant as a shield, knowing very well that the Ukrainian army will not retaliate, because obviously no one wants to have an accident at this point in time. But I don't know that you can use that and say, as a result of that, we shouldn't be considering nuclear power. I think the question is, you have to build them with the safeguards, and they are built with the safeguards. The only safeguard that we can't build against is some crazy nut deciding to do something like what Mr. Putin has done. I'm sorry if there are any folks here from Russia, but that's the reality. He's putting a lot of us people at risk.
One more question, if you don't mind. I don't know if this is the last, but again, just 5 to 10 year horizon.
Yeah.
At least that's how long we can still stay in the board. In your personal opinion, with this tight situation, 18 and 16, or probably 20-17 ratio capacity as to utilization, your projection, because you're very much in the industry now, with your 2 power plant, just on a 5 to 10 year horizon, you think we can survive with a GDP growth of, let's say, averaging 6-7%? This is a very interesting question, because we'll know our situation.
My answer to that is unequivocally yes. And the reason why I said that is I look around, I see folks like David, I see this young man, I see our future. We may be gone, but they're the future, and they will manage that, and we will survive.
That's my
forecast.
Yeah. But are you aware of any new plants, any new projects that are, let's say, already approved with the PSA? Because PSAs are so difficult to secure.
Here's what I know today.
In the last 6 years, we have not really heard of any new plant that got started, right?
Actually, no, there were a couple of coal-fired plants in the north. Davis plants started.
Largest in the country.
Yeah, the largest coal-fired plant in the country started, and very successfully. So
what year was it started?
It's commissioning right now.
Convention.
One has been.
Yeah, but it was started.
Yeah.
20.
It was built. It took 4 years to build.
Yeah, about 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years to
That
build.
was approved during
Yeah.
Pinoy's administration, right?
Right.
Previously.
Yeah.
What you have now is you have an interesting situation. There was somebody that won a 1,200 megawatt power supply agreement through a competitive selection process. And the problem is the supplier of the LNG, because this is an LNG combined cycle, supplier of the LNG, because of the current situation in Europe and the ability to sell the LNG for a lot more money, walked away. So this proponent that won 1,200 megawatts worth of combined cycles is facing a very difficult situation. Would you build a plant knowing that you have no gas behind? Are you going to take a price risk on that? It's a very interesting situation, but that's ongoing right now. This is actually a real thing. So they did win the CSP. Unfortunately, the gas is down the line, and some of the plants will be retired and will be replaced by something else. LNG seems to make sense, but not today, and probably not for a while. It takes about, by the way, I think you guys may know this, it takes about 6 months for the market to react. So even if fuel prices begin to come down at the end of the year, the war stops, Ukraine wins. Should I say that? Maybe not. Maybe it's a tiebreaker. It will take 6 more months before the market adjusts. That means we're looking at high fuel prices to stay high for at least another year.
Thank you, Frank. So I think we're out of time, but to wrap this up, just want to some quick advice for us here, maybe, and for the country. The president recently mentioned that the fundamental requirement for growth and increased employment will be the availability of cheap, reliable power. What are some of your tips on how the country can achieve that cheap, reliable energy in the country in the short to medium term? Or is there, what is your thoughts on that?
I think it's going to be very challenging. I think obviously, since we don't have the indigenous fuel resources, we're going to have to depend on what we can get. And unfortunately, at this point in time, you're going to be competing with a lot of countries that are not even asking how much is the fuel today. Think about it. I'm going to go to a supplier and I'm going to say, I'd like to get some LNG for our country. We really need that in the Philippines, guys. I'm willing to pay, 7 pesos. And he's going to turn to me and say, I can get 40 pesos elsewhere. What would I want to sell to you? That's what makes it very, very challenging. Renewable energy can help us to some degree, but again, how much of that are we going to be able to put on the ground very quickly? 200 megawatts, 300 megawatts, 400 megawatts? It's a challenge. I think the president means well. I think the administration has the right ideas. The question is, how do we support that with the challenges we're facing, especially with fuel prices being as complicated as they are right now?
Thank you very much. And I think.
Okay, thank you, Frank, for a very enlightening talk today. I mean, that's what makes our club so interesting, is that every week we learn something new. Last week, we heard from David Lichu talking about a very, very bright future. And no matter what happened with COVID, we were just, economy was going up and up. And now today, you tell us about the few humps along the way, which bring our foot back down the ground. Thank you so much for all your insights. And, for on behalf of our Rotary Club, we'd like to give you a few mementos. This one is a certificate of appreciation presented to Frank Thiel, Quezon Power Philippines Limited.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The next one is our hard copy of our 55th year in the Rotary Club. All our class presidents are here, and there are a lot of them here today. No, this was before. Thank you. Thank you. And lastly, while you are reading our book, here's something to read the book by. Okay, so thank you everybody for attending today. With your permission, may I call this Rotary meeting adjourned?